Hey, welcome back. Thanks for watching this video. Thank you to all of the people who've been commenting and liking. I didn't think I'd be, that concerned with it, but reading the comments, seeing those likes, it makes me feel good, and thank you. I wanted to thank all of you for doing that, and everybody who's watched too. I appreciate all the looks. So I figured I'd start this video off with a little bit more about myself and some of the other projects that I've done. Starting with the guitar that first got me into it, this one. Now this was a custom built neck through body guitar that I bought from a friend. It was in very poor shape, maybe 25 years ago, something like that. That sounds about right. Maybe a bit longer. In either case, it was black. It was not in great shape. I mean, it's still not in perfect shape because I've kind of like used it for parts. But I did decide to refurbish this, and so with some help from my grandfather, got it into shape, and then this was my first real finishing project, I guess. Bridge was previously a Floyd Rose that was completely broken, and it was not a type that I had seen before. So I took that, or got that filled in, and that's something that my grandfather helped me with. And then I put the rest of the hardware on, and really just been using it for parts though. I have been playing guitar for about, I guess it'd be 28 years now, or thereabouts. The next project was a full kit. What I did was, the kits usually come with all the hardware. In this case, it was a thin line telly style with a Bigsby style bridge. It is not a Bigsby, it's a Bigsby style. And the first thing I put in here were a couple of P90s in humbucker dimensions. Then the other thing I decided to do was I took those out, and I wanted to put in these Filtertron likes. Then also put in a coil split. So no matter where you're at, it splits the coils of both, is how that one works. Just as the pandemic was beginning, I got this little half-scale guitar kit from stuartmcdonald.com, and did this with my kids. So the front was designed by my son, the back was designed by my daughter. I took the neck myself, as well as the headstock. I wanted to do those. Some little flourishes I added there, or we added, where I carved this little design in that my son drew, and we put in glow-in-the-dark powder with some super glue on top. Likewise for the back here, although I didn't do as good a job on this part. This was a kit that I think I got on bargainmusician.com, and the only thing I changed for this kit was the knobs. I decided to change to a different style, and you'll see something similar when I finish this Firebird kit. The hardware I swapped out for black hardware along with a rolling ball tune-o-matic bridge, and a couple of Seymour Duncan P-rails, so with triple shot. So I can do single coil if I move up there. There's a couple of switches here you probably can't see. Single coil, P90, humbucker, I think it's series. No, that's parallel. And then if they both go in, it's series. But this was a nice kit. I really enjoyed doing this one. Got some decent results. Made a lot of mistakes that I learned from, which is going to be a theme, obviously. Just wanted to say thank you again, show you a little bit around, and let's get to the build. Thanks. Alright, so we'll start in with carving the headstock. And as you can see, I've done a little bit of work on that already. Now I'm just sort of cleaning up those curves and lines. You can also see some faint lines on where I'm going to carve in a logo. I'm going to fill that carve with resin epoxy mixed with glow-in-the-dark powder because I've got some and I like using it.
You really have to just love the sanding. If you want to make guitars, that is. I guess you don't have to love it. I don't. Unless it's wet sanding. I like that. So here's where I'm going to carve in that logo. I've got a little template that I've made. I'm using a Dremel tool with a router base. And as you can see, it might be going too fast or spinning too fast because you can see a little bit of smoke coming out. It's burning the wood a little bit. Not a huge deal, but I wanted to take this in real time just so that you could see how slow I'm moving through this template. And then I'll speed it up once you kind of get that idea. I always see these videos of, here's the speed up. I always see these videos of people building guitars and using routers, and it's like sped up so fast that it's not clear how much time it really takes to get that carve right. At least to get it right without being sloppy. Usually when I go too fast, it just looks a bit sloppy. Now I'm going to clean it up a little bit with some hand tools. I was really having a hard time deciding what I wanted the headstock to look like for this build in terms of stain or paint or what I wanted to do with it. So I decided that I would like to try another ombre, going from black through blue to green and finally to yellow. So in this image, you can see on the left, to the left of my hand there's a small white bottle. That is the dye for the epoxy resin. And on the right side of the table there is a little jar with some glow-in-the-dark powder there. The white jar is white dye, on the left that I just picked up. On the right, I've got that glow-in-the-dark powder. I believe the color of that was teal, at least as it was on the label. Toothpicks are some of my favorite tools. Popsicle sticks as well, great for stirring things. You can find both of those at either craft stores or grocery stores even. So here I'm putting in a little bit of dye, and then I'm going to grab this glow-in-the-dark powder, get a few scoopfuls in. I didn't really do any testing with this to see how it would turn out, but I did put in plenty of this powder. It might not be teal, it might be sky. Lots of mixing it up. It says to mix it for a few minutes. I can't remember the exact amount of time, but we'll go quickly through this. It really does come out kind of blobby, but again, there's that toothpick. So just put it in as much as I could, or fill it in as much as I could. Then I'm going to take a paper towel, wipe off the excess a bit, and then wait for it to dry. Oh, but before it dries, I wanted to try something else with it. I wanted to try and get a little swirl of this blue. And so this is something, when I worked in a restaurant many, many years ago, they let me decorate dessert plates. I would take the coulis or whatever we had and kind of use a toothpick to make a design on the plate. That worked a lot better than this did. This ended up, I think, a little bit too much blue for me, for my taste, but it still looks all right. I wanted it to be more of a white with some blue accent, and I think what I got here was like blue with a little bit of white accent. So I sanded it a little bit once the resin epoxy had dried, and then went back and tried to fill in that stain again to get the same sort of ombre that I had gotten before. You can see now I'm using a brush because I wanted to make sure I had a little extra precision in those spots right by the that inlay there. And while that looks nice, I didn't like the way it looked against the rest of the body. So I decided to start over on the headstock, as you can see. Ultimately, I decided I think what might look best with this is just going with black. And with this aniline dye, I didn't quite have the mixture I wanted, ratio of dye to alcohol, or denatured alcohol. So I had to kind of mix a little bit more to get the black that I really wanted to get. But I think we're getting there. So I got a little black stain right on the inlay that I wanted to clean up too, so I used a little paper towel to try and get that out. And here we are putting another clear coat on the headstock. I decided I want this glossy, so we're spraying that. I really think I'm putting too much on here at one time. I need to go slower. I need to put less on. You can kind of see that as I was sanding through. So here I'm just going to touch it up. And that's the problem. It's always really tough to, when you sand through something, it's always, for me at least, very tough to get the same finish that I had on it previously. Better to get it right than to have to do it over, is some advice that I've obviously never heard before. And so previously I mentioned using a technique that I saw a video for on stumac.com or the Stuart McDonald YouTube channel, but to fill these little divots or dents or imperfections that I had with a little bit of super glue, and then you get a straight razor and you put just regular Scotch tape on either side of whatever width you're trying to get. So this is, I'm scraping down the super glue after it's dried here, and that tape apparently is 2/1000ths of an inch thick, so that's kind of acting as a depth stop. So I'm going to scrape all the spots where I filled with super glue. You can kind of see where it's starting to get flat. Sorry about the view, really doing the best that I can. And then the next step is strip sanding. Never go in the same direction twice, with incremental grit counts on your sandpaper. So this first one is 400, I move up to 800 eventually, then on to 1000 grit, 1200 grit, 1500 grit, and finally 2000 grit sandpaper. It doesn't take much time, don't go too far, but you can kind of see how it's leveling it all off now. After that, I cut some 2000 grit sandpaper to match the sanding block, and I'm really trying to go in and take out those fine scratches with even finer scratches. That previous one wasn't 2000 grit. I think I'm moving up through the grits at this point. I think the strip sanding was really 400 and 800 and 1000. And then the last one was 1200 grit. This is 1500 grit. We'll move on to 2000 grit. But basically, it's all the same step. And so now the wet sanding. Starting at 400 again, moving up to 800. I'm using free cut paper. I used the wrong side of the paper. Here we are at 1500 grit. I think we're now at 2000 grit. You can kind of see it left a few dots, but it is flat now. I have a feeling this is a chemical reaction from the super glue and the acrylic enamel paint that I used, but it's able to be polished up and looks pretty good. Thank you for watching. Be sure to check out all of the great guitar build-off content. There's some really great stuff out there.